We live in an age where our telescopes can capture light from galaxies formed mere billions of years after the Big Bang. We can edit genes, simulate the birth of stars, and send robots to roam distant planets. Yet, with all this scientific prowess, one truth continues to haunt our daily lives. Human beings, despite being more informed than ever, feel increasingly unanchored. We are swimming in oceans of data, yet thirsting for meaning. We've learned to split the atom and entangle photons across space, but have forgotten how to sustain inner clarity. How can a species so advanced in external exploration remain so disoriented in internal navigation? This is not just a philosophical dilemma. It is a structural fault in the way we relate to ourselves and the universe. We've expanded our reach outward, but not our understanding inward. And here lies the real question. Could it be that the next frontier of science isn't only out there, but in the unseen yet measurable fields of interaction between the human mind, the body, and the cosmos? But let's clear something up from the start. When we speak of a new Earth, we're not talking about science fiction or a hidden planet tucked behind Saturn. We're not waiting for alien contact or divine intervention. The new Earth is not a new rock in orbit, it's a new frame of reference. A shift, not in geography, but in cognition. It is not a place, but a pattern. And this shift doesn't begin with new governments or new technologies, it begins with new kinds of minds interacting with an ancient universe. You see, reality isn't some fixed landscape that unfolds in front of us. In physics, especially quantum physics, we've learned that observation shapes the observed, that the very act of noticing a particle changes its trajectory. So what happens when 7 billion observers are walking around, perceiving reality through the lens of fear, judgment, or distraction? What happens when the human nervous system, a bioelectrical marvel, is constantly agitated, tuned to threat rather than truth? That's not just psychology, that's physics, specifically the physics of information fields and feedback loops. Your heart, for instance, emits a measurable magnetic field that extends several feet beyond the body. It's not new age fluff, it's recorded by magnetometers and supported by peer-reviewed studies in bioelectromagnetism. Your brain, constantly firing in electrical waves, isn't just interpreting the world, it's projecting patterns into it. Just as gravitational waves ripple through space-time when black holes collide, your biological rhythms ripple through the immediate environment. You affect more than you realize, and you are affected by more than you perceive. Think of two tuning forks placed close to each other. Strike one, and the other begins to resonate. This is known as sympathetic vibration. The universe doesn't just store energy, it shares it. And that's where the deeper shift begins, not by acquiring power, but by tuning better. So when we speak of expanding your field, we're speaking scientifically. We're talking about increasing the coherence, amplitude, and harmonic stability of your personal electromagnetic environment. When you're under chronic stress, cortisol floods your bloodstream, your heart rate variability narrows, and your electromagnetic field contracts just like a star nearing gravitational collapse. But when you enter states of deep awareness through reflection, breath control, or even time in nature, your biological signals become more synchronized. Heart and brain begin to dance in resonance. Your body literally becomes more efficient. Immune function strengthens. Intuition sharpens, not in a mystical sense, but because your sensory bandwidth clears. You become more like a signal tower than a sponge transmitting, not just absorbing. This isn't metaphysical idealism, it's systems theory, it's biology, it's physics, and it's psychology, all converging to tell us the most important change isn't out there. It's in the signature your presence contributes to the collective. You don't wait for the new Earth. You become a condition for its emergence. You see, coherence is not just a state of emotional peace, it's the structural integrity of your internal physics. Imagine trying to build a bridge across a river with beams misaligned and tension wires out of sync. No matter how noble the blueprint, the structure won't hold. The same is true of consciousness. Coherence is what allows a system to not only function, but to thrive. And when enough coherent systems gather, whether they are neurons, ecosystems, or individual submergence happens, This is one of the most powerful concepts in modern science, emergence. When the parts of a system become so synchronized that the whole begins to behave in ways the parts alone never could. A school of fish moves as one body, not because they vote or speak, but because of alignment. A flock of birds shifts direction in midair with astonishing unity, not from a command, but from distributed intelligence, each bird syncing with just a few neighbors, yet producing breathtaking coordination. And human society is no different. When enough individuals tune to a coherent state, they produce a gravitational pull, not metaphorically, but behaviorally, neurologically, social, that others begin to resonate with. Like the gravitational center of a galaxy holding billions of stars in place, coherence becomes an organizing force. Now imagine this not in the sky, but in your daily life. In classrooms, boardrooms, kitchens, and street corners. Imagine people entering conversations not to dominate, but to attune. Not to impose, but to integrate. The impact would not be dramatic at first, it would be subtle, a tone, a pause, a deeper breath before a reply. But over time, just as tectonic plates shift silently before a quake, this internal coherence would reshape the cultural landscape. Because coherence, once present, is contagious. It spreads not as doctrine, but as design. It influences behavior not by pressure, but by precision. This is the science behind social evolution, not revolution, evolution. And it begins not with mass protests or massive laws, but with the physics of frequency, with what you carry into the moment, with the information your nervous system transmits in silence before your mouth ever speaks. It is in this unseen layer of reality, the electromagnetic, the cognitive, the affective, that the future of Earth is quietly forming. So what does it mean to be part of this shift? It means you stop waiting for global consensus. You stop outsourcing transformation to politics, to markets, to ideologies. You begin with something far more local and far more universal, your own coherence, because your personal field is not isolated, it is entangled. Every pulse of clarity you radiate, every wave of alignment you stabilize, contributes to the invisible geometry of the collective mind. In quantum mechanics, we learned a strange but undeniable truth. Particles, when entangled, affect each other instantaneously, regardless of distance. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, but today it is a measurable fact of nature. What this tells us is that in the fabric of the universe, information is not confined to classical space-time. It flows in patterns we are only beginning to understand. And while the entanglement of subatomic particles may seem worlds away from daily life, the principle it teaches is profound. Systems, once connected, remain in dialogue. Now apply that to humans. Neuroscience has already shown that when two people spend enough time together, their brainwaves can begin to synchronize. Their heart rates subtly align. Even their micro-expressions begin to echo each other's emotional states. This is not philosophy, it's biophysics. You are a node in a vast neural web, and your presence carries a signature that others unconsciously decode. This is why someone's calm can settle a room. Why another person's anxiety can infect a group like static electricity. It's not about words, it's about fields. Your body is constantly broadcasting signals, electromagnetic, chemical, behavioral. And these signals do not vanish into thin air. They land, they interact. They reshape the invisible architecture of shared space, which means every choice you make, how you breathe, how you listen, how you interpret is not just about your internal experience. It's about the informational climate you help construct. Like air currents influencing weather systems, your coherence ripples outward, creating pockets of order in a world teetering on chaos. And this is where individual responsibility becomes cosmically relevant. You are not a passive observer of reality. You are a contributor to its evolving state. Each moment of alignment is like a gravitational lens, subtly bending the trajectory of human interaction toward clarity. And the more people who stabilize this kind of field, the more likely we are to experience what systems scientists call a phase transition, a tipping point, a leap, not of technology, but of awareness. The beauty is, this doesn't require everyone. Nature never needs unanimity, just critical mass. Just enough resonance in the system to reorient its structure. When a population of atoms aligns in spin, a piece of iron becomes a magnet. When a certain number of people stabilize internal coherence, society begins to magnetize towards sanity. Picture a star, not just as a burning ball of hydrogen, but as an anchor in space-time. Its gravity holds planets in orbit, its light nourishes life. Its radiation shapes the chemistry of entire ecosystems. And yet, at its core, all a star is doing is maintaining equilibrium. It fuses hydrogen into helium at just the right rate, not too fast, or it collapses, not too slow, or it dies. It's not dominating its solar system, it's simply being coherent at scale. Now apply that same metaphor to a human being. Imagine your inner world, the rhythm of your breath, the coherence of your thoughts, the steadiness of your emotions, the equivalent of stellar balance. When you are internally aligned, your field measurable in electromagnetic terms radiates outward. You hold emotional orbits around you. People feel safer, more grounded, more lucid in your presence. You become, quite literally, a source of gravitational stability in a turbulent system. In this way, you don't change the world by arguing louder. You change it by becoming a starbee, fusing your intention with integrity, and holding that fusion long enough for others to orbit into coherence. Not because you forced them to, but because your presence made it possible. In a society spiraling with informational noise and emotional entropy, the most powerful agent of change is a person who does not waver. A person who does not contract. A person whose internal gravity has become strong enough to shape local space. This is not a metaphor. It is physics, psychology, and biology intersecting in the lived reality of daily life. And it leads us to an inescapable conclusion. Expanding your inner coherence is not self-indulgent. It is structurally consequential. In fact, it may be the most responsible act available to anyone living in a world that grows more reactive by the day. Because one coherent node stabilizes many, like a pulsar emitting a steady beat in the galactic dark. Your field, when clear, can serve as a navigational point in the emotional night sky of others. So the question is not, how do I fix the world? The better question is, can I maintain my own fusion? Can you sustain clarity without needing control? Can you hold compassion without collapsing into chaos? Can you become like a star in axis of order in a universe that's still expanding? Let's bring this down from the stars back into the nervous system. You may wonder, what does coherence actually look like in everyday life? It's not some lofty mystical state. It's measurable. It's trainable. And it begins with how you treat your own biology. Take your breath, for instance. In a stressed state, your respiration becomes shallow, erratic, and rapid. This sends signals to your brain that the environment is unsafe, activating the amygdala, flooding your system with cortisol, narrowing your perception, and literally shrinking your electromagnetic field. Now, contrast that with slow, rhythmic breathing. Science calls this resonant frequency breathing, typically around 5 to 6 breaths per minute. At this rhythm, the heart rate begins to harmonize with the breath. The brain's alpha waves synchronize, blood pressure stabilizes. In short, the entire system shifts from defense to receptivity. You're not just relaxing, you're recalibrating. You're expanding the system's informational bandwidth. The body begins to move from survival mode to adaptive mode. This is not magic. This is neuroscience. This is physiology. This is thermodynamics at the level of your own cells. And the same principles apply to attention. The more fragmented your focus, the more your thoughts scatter between screens, notifications, and endless loops of comparison, the less stable your internal signal becomes. Your mind, under those conditions, behaves like a quantum particle in a superposition of tabs. But when you focus deeply, undistracted, the brain's default mode network quiets, prefrontal integration increases, neural plasticity rises, meaning you begin to rewire your brain toward clarity, toward coherence. Now add to this the power of presence and conversation. When you truly listen not to respond, but to understand, you engage mirror neurons in others. These are biological mechanisms that allow people to feel seen, felt, and synchronized. In a conversation with true presence, even the autonomic nervous systems of two people can begin to synchronize, heart rates align, muscle tension drops, oxytocin increases. Again, not theory, not metaphor, biology. These are the microphysics of transformation. You don't need grand rituals or supernatural tools. You need attention. Intention, breath, space, because every time you engage in these seemingly small acts, you are shaping your internal resonance, you are tuning your field, and that tuning doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how the entire system around you behaves. Because as in all complex systems, a small change in the initial conditions can lead to vastly different outcomes. This is called sensitivity to initial conditions, or in common language, the butterfly effect. But instead of a butterfly, it's your breath, it's your thought, it's the tone of your presence in a difficult room. These are the levers of reality you actually control, not the chaos outside, but the coherence within. Now imagine what happens when not just one person, but a cluster of people begin to operate from coherence. We're no longer talking about isolated neurons, we're talking about a neural network, a social nervous system. And just like in biology, when enough nodes in a system fire in synchronization, the entire system reorganizes. This is the science of emergence. A flock of birds doesn't need a leader, it needs alignment. A crowd of people doesn't need a savior, it needs stability and motion. Consider a simple wave pool. Drop a single pebble, and the ripples are small, transient. But drop multiple stones at precise intervals in harmonic rhythm, and those waves begin to intersect, not chaotically, but constructively. The amplitude grows, the pattern becomes visible, the energy, once scattered, begins to focus. This is constructive interference, and it's not just a physics concept, it's a social reality. When a few individuals hold internal coherence in the presence of disorder, their signals don't just remain personal, they amplify. They become waveguides for others. This is how cultural tipping points occur. Not because the majority suddenly awakens, but because a critical minority holds coherence long enough for the system to restabilize. Scientists call this percolation threshold, or phase transition. It's the moment ice becomes water, water becomes steam, and old structures melt into new possibilities. And here's the key. These transitions aren't driven by volume, they're driven by resonance. In other words, it doesn't take a stadium. It takes a signal, a clear enough signal, repeated through time, echoed through people, embodied in behavior, one classroom of students practicing presence, one business team operating from clarity, not reactivity, one community refusing to collapse into outrage. These aren't grand revolutions. They're quiet recalibrations. But over time, they shift the base frequency of society. We've seen it before through history. The civil rights movement didn't begin with 1 million people. It began with a few individuals whose coherence, seminal, emotional, and intellectual was unshakable. Scientific paradigms shift not when everyone agrees, but when a few minds generate enough empirical coherence to disrupt the noise of dogma. This is the true architecture of transformation. Small nodes of stability, reorganizing entire networks. And so the question becomes, what kind of field are you bringing into your relationships? Your workplace, your community? Are you amplifying entropy or coherence? Modern physics has slowly eroded the illusion of a passive universe. No longer can we think of reality as a fixed backdrop, like a cosmic stage on which life merely performs. Quantum mechanics tells us that observation is participation, that measurement shapes outcome, that the act of witnessing alters the wave. This means that consciousness, your consciousness, is not a spectator sport. It's a force, a contributor, a variable in the equation of reality. In this light, the universe is not a machinette, is a dialogue. And your energy, your emotional coherence, your intellectual clarity, your ethical consistency is a kind of syntax in that cosmic language. You are not waiting for the new Earth to arrive like a package on your doorstep. You are helping write it moment by moment, thought by thought, signal by signal. When you choose stillness in a world addicted to speed, you are transmitting a new pattern. When you listen deeply in a culture drowning in noise, you are bending the probability curve of connection. When you bring compassion into a moment of division, you are rewriting the local physics of human relationship. These aren't small gestures. They are nonlinear interventions in a complex system. And they matter. Because reality isn't static. It responds, it echoes, it bends. So the great illusion is not that the world is broken, it's that we are powerless to shape it. But just as gravity isn't seen, only felt, your influence doesn't always announce itself. It radiates quietly, persistently, through your tone, through your attention, through the fields you carry into each space. And the science is clear. Systems do not require total conversion to transform. They require coherence. They require enough nodes of order to reorganize the chaos. Which means your coherence is not personal development, it is civilizational infrastructure. It is how we get from here to whatever comes next. So here we are, on a small, rocky planet orbiting an ordinary star, in an unremarkable corner of one spiral galaxy only among hundreds of billions. From that perspective, our lives could seem inconsequential, a blip, a footnote in cosmic time. But that's only part of the truth, because if the universe has taught us anything, it is that complexity can arise from simplicity, that galaxies form from the whisper of hydrogen, that life itself emerges from molecules aligning in just the right way, and that consciousness, this strange, luminous quality we call awareness, can shape the very fabric of the world it perceives. You are not separate from that story. You are not outside the universe looking in. You are the universe aware of itself wrapped in skin, breathing atmosphere, pulsing with electromagnetic rhythm. And in every moment, whether you know it or not, you are shaping probability, not with magic, with biology, with physics, with coherence. You don't need a telescope to see the stars inside you. You don't need a laboratory to validate your power to influence reality. Every breath you take is an experiment. Every thought is a transmission. Every emotion, a vibration. So the new Earth is not a myth. It is not a utopia on the horizon. It is a frequency, a structure built not of concrete and law, but of consciousness and resonance. And you don't wait for it to arrive, you become it. You live it forward. You carry its signature into meetings, into conversations, into moments of pain and uncertainty. Not because you've mastered life, but because you've remembered. You are a participant in its design. The universe is not asking you to be perfect. It is asking you to be coherent, to show up with clarity in a time of noise, to hold gravity in a time of collapse, to radiate presence in a time of absence. That's the work. That's the invitation. Because the most powerful force in the cosmos is not destruction. It's not chaos. It's resonance. And when enough of us, remember that when enough of us live from that internal alignment, the Earth may not change in form, but the experience of being human upon it will feel like another world entirely. Not because the planet moved, but because we did.